Okay, so before I get to the questions, there are 6 ballot questions that we get to vote on, and some of them are straightforward, some of them are not. And sometimes I don't know when it says vote for it, vote against it, I don't know what it means. So we're fortunate to have people who are very familiar with these topics, who did some research on them, and who have been actively working on it for several months, years, to speak on it. I have them in this order here, but what I want to do is I want to go over question 1 and question 3 first, and it's because Claudia, she just took the COVID booster today, and the symptoms are the symptoms are coming. So we want to, hopefully they're not that bad right now, and we can have Claudia present and then go to the other questions. So that's question 1 is a constitutional amendment to rename the Court of Appeals, Maryland Court of Appeals, to the Supreme Court of Maryland. And Claudia, do you want to maybe give a little bit of your background as well before you discuss 1 and 3?
Sure. Thank you very much, Yuri. And I'm sorry, but yeah, I got my 4th booster shot, and it's I'm starting to feel the effects. But so I am an attorney. I have been for, I guess, 36 years. I was originally a prosecutor in Prince George's County, and now I work for the WSSC. And that is a bi-county state agency that handles the water and sewer services for Montgomery and Prince George's County. So as far as ballot question 1 is concerned, my understanding from some of the literature, I think it was in the legislature, the chief judge of the Court of Appeals wanted to change this name for a few years. It's Judge Barbera, and she's retiring this year. And so I think as a tribute to her, a couple of Prince George's County legislators put in the constitutional ballot. I believe they have a new courthouse, so the thinking was everything will be brand new and we'll have a new name change. To give you a little bit of context, the Court of Appeals is the highest court in Maryland. It was established in 1776. The other court, which is below the Court of Appeals, is called the Court of Special Appeals, and that was established in the 1960s because the bar and the legislators determined that there were too many cases going to the Court of Appeals, and they needed to establish another level to sort of stave off the volume. So they called it the Court of Special Appeals. All cases, if you want to appeal your case from the circuit court, and that means a criminal or civil case, goes to the Court of Special Appeals generally first. And they don't have any discretion of hearing it or not. If you file appellate papers, they have to hear it. The Court of Appeals is different. They can, if you are unhappy with the decision of the Court of Special Appeals, you can appeal to the Court of Appeals, but it's discretionary. The Court of Appeals can decide whether to hear it or not. So that is the sort of history. I think, in my own opinion, you don't have to listen to me, obviously. I think it's a silly name change provision. There's nothing wrong with the Court of Appeals or Court of Special Appeals. The whole reasoning behind wanting to change it seems rather personal to me. And one of the arguments was, well, it confuses attorneys. And I'm sorry, if an attorney is confused by those two names, maybe they shouldn't be an attorney. And the fact that it has a distinct name different from, let's say, 49 of the other states. I think New York is the only other state that has a distinct name like this, as opposed to Court of Appeals and Supreme Court, I think is kind of nice. It's sort of like our flag. You know, there is no other flag like the Maryland flag. It looks sort of like it belongs at the Renaissance Fair. So that's the question is, do you want to vote yes for changing the name or no for changing the name? Are there any?
Okay. Yeah, are there any questions? Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Is there a question?
I guess so. Oh, I see Carl has her hand up. Do you want to go first?
No, you went first. Go ahead.
All right. So the name changes. So you think that the name change is just too big a deal, and it's only for the attorney's sake? Because, as you said, they get confused on the names and what cases go to which court.
That's what the information and notes said in the legislative, discussion. It said attorneys get confused. They didn't provide any data. It wasn't like, we polled 3,000 attorneys and, 40% of them didn't understand what court to go to or what the level of courts mean or what this, designation is. So, I think it's just anecdotal. Maybe when you're in law school and you're learning this, it's like, oh, I'm so confused. Is it Court of Special Appeals or Court of Appeals? I don't know.
So would it cost any money if we had it changed? Does it cost, because they have to change names, I guess, on the stationery and stuff? Is it costly? Do you know?
They didn't analyze that, but they would have to change the stationery. The judges would now be called justices, just like in the Supreme Court of the United States. The buildings would have to have, their titles changed. It would be the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court as opposed to what it is now. So there is a cost to it. They just didn't supply what that cost would be.
Thank you.
That is a very, very good. I had not even thought about the impact in terms of changing the stationery and all those things. So yeah, those are very important considerations on this question. Okay, so let's go to question 3 next, and I think that is maybe do you want to summarize it, Claudia?
Yes. So the Maryland Constitution provides that in order for an individual to be able to file for a jury trial in a civil case. The lowest amount, the minimum, is currently $15,000. So if you have a case that involves something with $10,000, you can't request a jury trial. If you have something that involves $17,000, you could request a jury trial. Jury trials are heard only in the circuit court, not the district court. So the constitutional amendment is changing the limit, the minimum, from 15,000 to 25,000. So now you have to have at least a $25,000 claim or suit before you can request a jury trial in the circuit court. I don't think it's been changed for many, many years. And this is probably getting, it to a certain level because of inflation. I think it's been a couple of decades at least that it's stayed at 15,000. Yeah.
So one question that I thought about is with this, I mean, depending on what people prefer, whether it's jury trials or not jury trials, let's say they prefer jury trials, would it increase the number of suits, claims that are above 25,000 as a result of this? This is assuming that people prefer jury trials, but it may not be the case. So maybe that's the first thing. Do people prefer that? And if so, then would that have an impact in the amount in what they request?
That's a good question. It depends. I don't think it's going to increase the amount. I think what's going to happen is decrease the amount of jury trials that go to the circuit court because of that limit. 25,000 is pretty high. I mean, it's not the value of let's say you buy a used car and it's a lemon and you want to sue the dealership because you paid 12,000 or 17,000 for the used car. You wouldn't be able to ask for a jury trial. The thinking, I think, among the legal community is if you're, it's harder to convince 12 people or 6 people, which would be the civil jury trial amount of people that would hear the case, as opposed to convincing a judge. So there's always that. It just depends on the case here, really.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of variables there, so that may not be the thinking. Lori, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering what other states, what kind of limits they set.
I don't know. I don't know what other states, like Virginia, Delaware, the District of Columbia. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, one of the arguments that I heard about this was that it discriminated against, is this right, against people who were poor because they would have smaller lawsuits. But that didn't make any sense to me, because if you're going to hire a lawyer and go to a jury trial, that's pretty expensive, isn't it? So that just, for $15,000 to hire a lawyer, why not go to a sit before a judge? You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Jury trials take a lot longer. They're more complicated. You have to go through a jury array, voir dire, and
right.
Yeah, I don't think that is correct, that it would impact less economically sound folks at all. I mean, if you have a contract claim, the amount is the amount. The only time it varies any bit is when you have a tort case, a negligence case, where you've been harmed and your claim, your damages depend on how, what your hospital bill is, what therapies you've been doing, what counseling you've had to do, how it impacted you going to work. That's when it gets, sort of squishy, and you can, continue going to physical therapy just to bump up the cost and to make your damages higher than they are. So, yeah, I don't think it would impact, people with lesser economic standing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, very good. Thanks, Claudia. We will go to, we'll now go in order of the questions, and we'll start with question A, the referendum on CB 63 2020, and so we have Lori Liskin who will explain that question. And same thing, Lori, maybe you could start with your background and your involvement with the topic and so on and so forth. Thanks, Lori.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I hope you're all familiar with this bill, but my name is Lori Liskin, and I have been involved in the issue about rights for immigrants for, 3 years now. I was co-facilitator. I'm now the only facilitator of the Immigration Action Team for Indivisible, and I've worked with both Fern and now Luminous. And Indivisible is part of the Howard County Coalition for Immigrant Justice, and we were the group, including CASA and ACLU and Jews United for Justice and a whole bunch of other great people, that made Calvin Ball's life miserable and eventually got him to, it was part of the reason. He had his own reasons to end the contract with ICE. So anyway, what the CB 63 is, it's called the Liberty Act. It was passed 4-1 in the County Council in December of 2020 and immediately signed into law by Calvin Ball. I think it was his way of dealing with the fact that he had vetoed Liz Walsh's bill to end, I think it was CB 59, to end the ICE contract. So the Liberty Act has basically 4 major things. It says that unless required by state or federal law, these are the following provisions. No county resources or employees can enforce federal immigration and national laws or assist immigration enforcement. It says county employees will not ask about immigration status. County employees will not collect or share any information about immigration status for immigration enforcement. And county employees will not share information about anyone's immigration status with another person. So, basically it says we won't go after immigrants, essentially. So this bill, as I said, was passed in 2020. And a little bit of background, when Calvin Ball was on the county council, he sponsored something called the Sanctuary Bill, which was a lesser version of this one. And it was vetoed by Kittleman, but it did cause a lot of controversy. So the Liberty Act is, a better bill and needs to be supported. But within days of its passage, a dreadful woman named Lisa Kim, who is running against Courtney Watson in District 9B, she started a group. I don't even know what to call it. They do have money. I'm not sure how you would describe it, but started a group to raise money to repeal the law. And by the end of January, she had $64,000. So Kittleman donated $5,000, Youngman donated $3,000, Gail Bates donated $4,000. But there were also a lot of very small donors, which suggested there's a great deal of anti-immigrant sentiment. So she got enough, she used the money she got to hire a Republican polling firm from Ohio, which brought pollsters who walked around Howard County and got people to sign a petition saying they wanted to repeal the law, but they did it in part by giving a lot of misinformation. The guy I talked to, or who talked to me, told me that if the law stayed, immigrants would overrun Howard County. So anyway, they got the 11,000 votes required to put a referendum question on the ballot to repeal CB 63. So there it is. And we strongly believe that everybody should vote for the law. And the reasons why, just very briefly, and I'm sure all of you know them, if immigrants feel like they're not going to be deported or sent to ICE, they're much more likely to cooperate with the police and making the county safer for everybody. Immigrants are stalwart members of our community. They work, they take jobs that people don't want. They pay taxes, they pay into Social Security, even though they cannot withdraw from Social Security. And last year, Fran Cho publicly said that people who have a federal an ITN number, which is an ID tax number, and that's mostly undocumented immigrants, paid over $100 million in state and local taxes in Maryland in 1 year. So, you know, these are people who work and, you know, do a lot of jobs, like I said, that other people don't want. And there are a lot of myths that immigrants are more likely to commit crimes and make everyone unsafe, but there's research all over the country that shows that it's not true, that immigrants are less likely to commit crime and less likely to go to jail than people who were born in this country. And those are rates, not numbers. And the point is essentially that we allow immigrants to work in this county. We often allow them to work in very exploitive conditions where they're paid well under minimum wage. And we require of them all of the obligations of citizenship, but we offer them very few of the benefits. So I see this as a human rights issue, and it is also an invasion of privacy. If we have the police going around asking us about our immigration status, they can ask us about everything else. And finally, it's the racial equality issue. If I am stopped for going through a red light, the police officer is not going to ask to see my immigration papers. So, but he would if I were brown skinned or if I were Asian. So that's essentially it. And I am encouraging you all to vote for and to tell everybody else you know to do the same thing. Now, the issue is most people don't know what Question A is. They don't know what the Liberty Act is. So we have been working really hard to get that information across. We have been handing out flyers. We have mailed out more than 1,000 postcards. We have done 36,000 texts. Dan Berlin from the HPP, with money from the Columbia Democratic Club, made a short video that, as of last week, had more than 23,000 views. CASA has hung door hangers, I don't know how many doors. So we're doing our best. We'll be at the polls for early voting, and the Democratic Combined campaign is going to has been handing out our flyers, and we'll have them at the polls.
Okay, thanks, Lori, for the explanation of Question A. Are there Any questions?
I hope everybody's voting for.
Yeah, I will vote. You know, I'll certainly be voting for the bill. I also or for the question. I do echo Megan's comment there about the poor record on immigration, you know, by the county executive and the previous county executive, Alan Kitterman. Frankly, ultimately, you know, the people who are against it, you know, claim it's an immigration bill. It's not an immigration bill. It's just preventing county resources from being used to enforce immigration laws. So it's not a big deal in terms of the way that they're presenting it. And I appreciate all the reasons why we should support this bill in terms of what immigrants bring to the county, with, you know, undocumented or not. And you know, I've also have heard compelling arguments for, we don't even need to have to say these things to support these common sense measures. It's just don't enforce immigration laws. It's in the county by don't use county resources. So thanks, Lori, for the summary. Yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
So the opposition has been putting all these signs up saying sanctuary bill, vote no. But the irony is they're putting them all on public land, which is illegal. And they put them up on a Friday, and then, you know, the police come and take them down. But, you know, the irony is it's apparently okay for them to break the law, but not okay for other people to break the law. So I'm happy to say that Rosinder, Linda, Leslie, and I all took down signs today in separate locations. I've got it stuck in my car. So I am going to put a link to the video in the chat.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. And so we'll go to the next question, question 2. And that is the eligibility to serve as a senator or a delegate. Putting a criterion that they should have. If I understand the question, they should have a primary residence in the place that in the district that they want to serve, and that would be Karen.
Yeah. Let me get my stuff up, my reference materials here. Give me 1 second, everyone. There it is, Ballot PDF. Okay, so this question, let me see if I can find the actual question. Hang on 1 second, you guys. I was doing all my research today on this one. So it's question 2 is a residency requirement for the state legislature. And basically what it's changing, and it's an amendment to the Constitution. So it's a residency requirement right now. You have to reside in your district, but it doesn't have to be your primary residence. And that's what this question seeks to change. So a yes vote, and I'm reading this from Ballotpedia, if anybody wants to know where I did my research, a yes vote supports amending the state constitution to require beginning in January 2024 that candidates for the state legislature maintain a primary place of abode in the district they wish to represent for at least 6 months prior to the date of their election, or for as long as the district has been in existence, and changing all gendered language in the amended sections to gender neutral language. So a no vote basically says that we're going to keep the Constitution the same way. So previous to this, apparently there was a senator who had multiple residences, and this happened, I actually think it happened like more than 20 years ago. But anyway, this one senator had multiple residences, but did not maintain a primary residence in their district. And part of the sense for this bill, the reason they're bringing it forth is they're saying that they don't believe, the people who brought this, Senator Charles Sidnor, who brought this bill up, said, I don't believe that you actually get a feel for what your constituents need if you are not actually living in their district. So this bill, when it was put in front of the legislature, I believe it passed unanimously. So pretty much everyone in the state legislature supports it, and it's very simple. And if anybody would like me to read to them the changes that it makes in the actual Constitution, I can do that. And I can also tell you the voting record. So 47 people in the Senate voted for it. That was, there were no votes and there were no abstentions. And then in the House of Representatives, 137 people voted yes and 4 people didn't vote. So it pretty much passed unanimously. And that's my brief one. Are there any questions on this one? I think it's fairly straightforward. Do any of the lawyers want to ask me some complicated questions, knowing I'm an IT project?
Carla.
Well, why would anybody not want to live in the district where they're representing it? I just don't understand that.
That is not covered on Ballotpedia, so I cannot explain that.
If I may, what has happened is that like a delegate or a representative will have, as Karen said, 2 or multiple residences. And so like there are various case law regarding this. You know, somebody who actually resides in or has a domicile, what they call a domicile in Bethesda, also has a condo in Ocean City. And so they will run for representative in Ocean City. And, you know, meanwhile, they don't have a voter registration in Ocean City. They have a house there, some mail goes there, but they don't vote there. They don't, their car is not registered in Ocean City or anything like that. So this is probably trying to rectify that.
Yeah, and I do think that there's a rumor, I don't have any evidence of this, but one of our local representatives may or may not have been keeping a primary residence in California. So I do think that this, and was spending the majority of their time there. So I do think it's a good law to have in place. Laura, you had your hand up. What was your question?
It's more of a comment. And this is an answer to what Carla was saying. It's not so much you want to represent a district where you don't live, but you want to take an advantage of running in a place where you, if you don't live in that district. So this is a chance to run. And that's what Lisa Kim is doing, because she didn't live. Her primary residence is not in 9B, but she's using somebody else's address in 9B. So it's another example of her breaking the law. It's okay for her to break the law, but not for other people. And there have been complaints about it, but apparently so far she's gotten away with it.
Well, she's not breaking the law yet, but she will be if this amendment passes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So Dr. Oz is doing this in Pennsylvania.
Exactly. Exactly.
The biggest example that we have that we know is true. Dr. Oz is actually from New Jersey. So yes. So if there's no more questions, Hiri, I think I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, that's because they have better crudité over in New Jersey than in Pennsylvania.
Well done.
Okay, thanks, Karen. So the next question is so question 4 is the constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana for adult use and possession. We have Eugene Monroe joining us to talk about this question. Eugene, thanks for taking the time to join our general membership meeting. I know you have a busy you're busy. You mentioned yesterday that you were doing some protesting over there in DC. Maybe you can also talk about that and also give us some your background.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Eugene Monroe here. I live in Dayton, Maryland, and I'm the chairman of the Yes on 4 campaign. And, our goal is to create, more awareness of this campaign question because of its importance. At its core, what I'd like to lead with is, a vote yes on question 4 will free somebody. Having a record can cause constraints on someone's life, their ability to get housing, to get, hired, education, a number of things that they're unable to access. And, for simply possessing cannabis, it's crazy that we're still punishing people for something that's happening so freely. And quite frankly, has been studied to be much healthier as an alternative to opioid drugs and less addictive than tobacco and alcohol. It will also, increase or create a boost in the economy which exists right now. Since medical cannabis has been in existence for a few years, there will be new licenses, new business opportunities for people, new businesses, which will, require new hiring, right? So new job opportunity for people in Maryland. And it will also allow law enforcement to, stop policing cannabis and refocus those energies, efforts, and finances to policing more violent crime. So, many reasons why, we support, and on that note, we protested in DC that there's action on a federal level to end prohibition, promises that the current president has made but has fallen short on. So we stood in front of the White House to protest and make it clear that, the people want those promises upheld. So, I thought it was important to be a part of that. And show my solidarity with everyone on that point. We need to bring back everybody who's in prison for cannabis. They're sitting behind bars. Quite frankly, they created the industry that they're watching. It's crazy. They need to be home. They need to be with their families. They need, the opportunity to, reintegrate and do business and do great things. They shouldn't be behind bars for cannabis. So voting yes can, help correct some of that here in Maryland, which, quite frankly, doing it here and legalization is also up in a number of other states, I believe 4 more. It can send a message, countrywide, because there's still some more states that, have a long way to go, even on a medical front.
Thanks, Eugene.
Hey, Hiri, can I ask a quick question? Eugene, are you ready for questions?
Sure.
I want to ask
Absolutely.
you. I am for legalizing cannabis. So when I ask my question though, if you don't know the answer, it's totally fine. But one of the things that concerns me with people who are serving prison sentences for things like cannabis is that they're being arrested in Baltimore, but they're not serving their sentences in a Baltimore prison, are they? How far away are they, when they're in prison, how far away from their homes are they sent? Because typically I know that people end up going to jail for various crimes. People end up going to jail in more rural jails or out of state jails. So I'm just curious if you know.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunately not something I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so I'll say my two cents, because I think this is important to tie this in, and so since I don't know for sure if this is happening, but a lot of times people in cities are, when they're arrested, they end up being sent out of state, far away from their families. So it's a huge hardship. They're not only, can their families not visit them, you know, or see them regularly anyway, because they're in jail, but then they're so far away that they can't visit them. The second thing is when they get counted in the census, whenever we do a census, they get counted in the census at the jail in the location for which they're serving. So it overinflates the numbers of people who actually live in more rural areas, which plays a part in how we figure out how many congressmen each area should get. So like a city like Baltimore, which is a high density city, ends up losing population and their population gets counted elsewhere. So there's multiple issues with this. So it's not just that they've committed a low level crime that they don't deserve to be punished for, but there are downstream impacts. And so Eugene, thanks for letting me have just a minute of your time.
No, that was excellent and educational on my part. I didn't, realize that kind of an impact was happening, but you made it clear that's something that needs to be addressed as well. So thank you.
Lori?
I am really struggling with this amendment. I 100% believe that people should not be in jail, and I understand the injustices. But I think there is a myth that marijuana is a safe drug, and it's not. It is safer than opioids, there's no question about it, but approximately 10% of all users become addicted. There are links, particularly when they start at very young ages, with cognitive impairment, and heavy use is associated with something called amotivational syndrome. It has higher rates of school dropout. And there are links with psychosis, psychotic episodes, specifically schizophrenia. And there's some really interesting research coming out of Yale that a tendency to get addicted is inherited, just as it is with alcohol. They've identified a gene and they're working on it. Leanna Wen, who used to be the head of the health department in Baltimore, wrote a very interesting op-ed about this in the Washington Post. I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I
would challenge your position very strongly. And unfortunately it comes from a position, I mean, you don't understand. So to say that it's not a safe drug, again, I was able to fully recover from partial shoulder, replacement, not using a single opioid drug, just using cannabis capsules that I got in the Maryland medical market. And there was nothing unsafe about that. In fact, I also didn't need to take the anti-inflammatory drugs that were prescribed alongside the oxycodone prescription that the surgeon prescribed for that surgery. Injury from a career playing professional football led me to cannabis. As a Baltimore Raven, I was, handed pharmaceutical drugs on a daily basis just to get through practice, just to get to game day, and then injected with more pharmaceuticals on game day just to get through. And so, introducing cannabis that's not smoked, right? A lot of people think, we're talking about smoking cannabis upon legalization when you can simply rub it on your skin. There's a ton of modalities that cannabis, it comes in an oil form, which you can introduce into a lot of products. And so, I think we're talking about a different thing. And in terms of the use with young people, we're not talking about including young people in this. And if you look at the stats from legalizing cannabis across our country, we do not see an increase in young people using cannabis in states. In fact, we see a decrease. And again, this is for adults 21 and older, and specifically adults 21 and older. So, I don't think that's an unfounded concern. And quite frankly, I've seen legalization, happen across the country really since I've been a part of this, and since 2014, really. And so, we have a chance, beyond your belief on whether or not you think it has application medically, what's happening is you're giving people their freedom back. You're giving people an opportunity, that have been torn from their families. I come from a community where directly in my family, we were impacted by the war on drugs. And so were, people all around me. And it's devastating, the conditions that people have to go through when they have a simple conviction because, their back hurt from working all day and they just wanted a little relief. And so, we can change that for people by voting yes on 4, regardless of, we have a ton of doctors in Maryland who have believed in this and they've been helping patients for years, and they also believe in the legalization of cannabis. And so while there may be a study that's come out, I've contributed to studies too. I've got published research with Johns Hopkins University on CBD. Studies are one thing, but actually being a physician who's dealing with patients who you were already treating and now you're introducing cannabis, it's changed lives across the board. And I'm just thankful that we have doctors that, see this and understand that although we're calling this adult use and this is, legalization for adults, it doesn't change the medical application of cannabis. You don't need a prescription to go get Tylenol. When my back hurts, I don't get a Tylenol, I use cannabis. And it's not creating an addiction. And I've been performing at the highest level I have in my life. I'm building an incredible size business. We're in New Jersey now. In terms of the motivational aspect, some of the highest performing human beings I've met in my life consume cannabis and are, quite frankly, doing the work, leading our states and our countries, and people are consuming cannabis probably around you and not telling you. And so, again, just I would consider, the fact that, first and foremost, if you don't believe that possessing stinky flowers should land somebody in prison, then vote yes. If you believe that if you have an opportunity to change somebody's life just by voting yes, I would vote yes. Vote yes on 4. Vote yes on 4.
Eugene, I did say that I was very torn, and I did say that I understood all of those legal things. My point, and I'm talking, these are population-based studies, not individuals. I smoked plenty of marijuana. I didn't get addicted. But this is a drug that can affect a minority of people in a very negative way. The law says that there is going to be some funds dedicated to businesses and to public health, but it doesn't say how many. So I think it is incumbent, if we're talking about justice here, that the sale, it has to be really clear how much THC you're getting, just like we have tar and nicotine. And there has to be funding for treatment because people do suffer a lot of side effects. So and I will just add one thing, Eugene. Let me just finish one thing, okay? I teach a class for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's a family-to-family class. And I will tell you, and I am not the only parent who has seen her child affected negatively by marijuana. I have heard many, many cases. So you have cases of people who do really well. I've heard cases of people who do badly. It's not an exact science, and we don't have a complete denominator to be able to do rates. All I'm saying, and I'm going to vote for the law, I'm just really torn because I want it to be really clear that this is not a safe drug. For a minority of people, it has very negative consequences. And I can admit that for some people, it has positives.
Absolutely. And again, I said safer than tobacco and alcohol. We understand that it's not a perfect drug either, right? But which one is? However, it's safer than any pharmaceutical drug that your doctor may prescribe you. And you're right, for a minority of the population, it can produce, some degree of issue. But it's a small minority, and overwhelmingly we're seeing positive results with the use of cannabis. So I actually love to see those population-based studies and see, how they perform those studies. Because a lot of studies on cannabis historically have been focused on a structure in a way that demonstrate harm. And so, regardless of the position of those studies, what we know and what physicians know in Maryland is that, this one, for medical issues, it has been providing relief consistently for people in Maryland. And they're thankful that they have access to cannabis. And that same access will be widespread for adults over 21 if we vote yes. And beyond that aspect of it, correcting, the wrongs of the war on drugs and getting people a second chance. We just need to do the right thing. So thank you for pointing out the fact that there are some issues. And again, you're talking to someone who knows that so much that I've committed my own finances to research on this and will continue to push and do research through my own business as well. And again, I stood in front of the White House pushing for the end of prohibition. One of the things that prohibition has caused is the inability to do such research, right? So that's also a part of my messaging. So I stand in line with you in terms of, understanding that there's some issues here, but at the same time, I also know that we're just scratching the surface of how beneficial this can be on the health front if we understand it. So, certainly standing to eliminate prohibition gets us a step closer. So thank you for, bringing up, how you're also opposed to this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was a very helpful exchange, Eugene and Lori. The bill, just based on what I'm hearing here and reading the ballot question, it's overall, it will have a positive impact on the state and ensures that people who have been arrested or legalizing the possession of marijuana will not be criminal anymore, which is a good thing. One thing that concerns me is in terms of making sure that addressing the past, addressing the negative impact on minorities. I don't think that will be done in an equitable way, just based on what I have seen in this state, in this country. And so that really concerns me in terms of, who's going to benefit from this. It's, I don't know if it will be, people who are in prison for or in jail for possession. And so hopefully that will be the next phase, which is if the state passes or if the state picks up legislation that picks up, that tries to address whether it's business licenses or how to use the revenue from the sales, how they deal with that. I think that would be the next phase. So thanks, Eugene, for presenting on question 4, and we will.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me time to talk about it. This is super important to me, so I appreciate the platform. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. Thanks, Eugene. So next question. So the next ballot measure is question 5, which is it's to abolish the orphans court or to repeal the orphans court and replace it with so that the circuit court handles the cases of the orphans court. We have Ward Morrow. He ran for Orphans Court in 2018. Ward, thanks for joining to talk about question 5. Maybe you can also give us add to that background little bit of background that I shared about you, and go from there.
Sure. Thanks. I actually also ran in 2002, but in Baltimore City. I was on the Democratic Central Committee and lived for a long time in the city. The Baltimore City prosecutor, 1990 to 2000. So if you watched The Wire, I was probably what you were watching. From 96 to 2000, I was in the felony narcotics unit and cross-designated as a special assistant U.S. attorney. So I've been practicing for about 33 years, the last 20 as an attorney for AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees, and before that, for 4 years, the American Federation of Teachers in Maryland. I wasn't sure what the format was, so I did a little bit of looking at the other questions, but I figured this was the one you wanted me to really address. And I'll tell you, my reason for running, I'll just be very brutally honest since I'm not on the ballot right now. In 2002, when I was living in the city, I ran for the Central Committee, but my senator, George Della, when he asked me to run for the Central Committee on his slate, I said, really, I'm more interested in, and I've always aspired to be a judge and not necessarily aspired to be on the Central Committee. So we talked about different things you could run for, and I had been thinking maybe clerk of the court as a stepping stone into that. And he said, do you want people to think of you as a clerk or a judge? And I said, well, preferably judge. And he said, well, then you should run for orphans court. And I said, well, I know that the orphans court is not juvenile court. I understand that it's probate court. And I am not a probate lawyer. And he said, yeah, that's fine. At the time, Baltimore City's law was similar to what Howard County's law is, that you weren't even required to be a lawyer. It's like, so you're head and shoulders more qualified than you need to be to even run for this. So I thought, well, okay, yeah, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I know a little bit about all kinds of areas of law. Certainly beats being a social worker or, somebody who's got no training in law. So I ran, was unsuccessful. And I noticed after that, they changed the law. They made it a requirement that you have to be an attorney for at least 5 years before you could be elected to the orphans court. And I think that makes sense. I don't think you should be a law student and be a judge. I don't think you should be a lawyer who just passed the bar and practiced for a day. Part of the problem is people who do practice in probate court can't really be a judge because it's a conflict of interest. So in some cases, they might practice probate law outside of, say, Howard County. But since they don't practice in Howard County, would be neutral. But I still, this is just me, but I still see that as a conflict. Part of the reason why I ran was that I didn't do probate law. I'm a labor lawyer. There's absolutely no conflict, I guess, unless maybe they're a member of the union that I represent, and then I would recuse myself if somebody that I knew for some reason. But there's always been a controversy within the Bar Association about elected judges. You always hear about elect the sitting judges, elect the sitting judges. And because those lawyers are vetted. And they're vetted by the Bar Association and various minority bar associations and a governor's commission. And I've been on those. I was with the Baltimore City Bar Association and I sat on their panel when I was a prosecutor in the city. So I know how that process works. One of the things that has concerned me for a while, and the Trump administration, I think, was the perfect example of the worst that could happen. You have them putting up for federal judgeships people who've never tried a case. Not only didn't try a probate case, they haven't tried any case, and they're going to be presiding over cases. So my point when I ran was, look, I'm running for judge of the orphans court. I've been involved in 20,000 cases as the district court prosecutor in Baltimore City, 2,000 felony cases during that time, and umpteen zillion union and arbitrations and administrative cases. I've certainly tried way more than one case. So I felt like I could run a good hearing. So that was my reason for running. Baltimore County, as well as Baltimore City and Prince George's County, require all their orphan courts judges to be lawyers. And I believe all three have a requirement of 5 years of practice. And I've been advocating for a while that we should do that in Howard County as well. We have had some problems with people that have gotten elected to the courts. So I'm told, again, I don't handle those kind of cases, so I don't have personal direct knowledge. I haven't sat there. I have not been a party to those cases. But when you're electing people, just kind of whoever runs for whatever reason, the quality of who you elect is based on who you elect. I think this particular way of doing it, though, and giving it to the circuit court, Montgomery County does it, Harford County does it, and circuit court judges are elected. So, I mean, there is that. But what it's doing is it's taking work that could be done somewhere else and overburdening other parts of the judiciary. We probably need more judges, not less, so that people can have speedy trials. But of course, if you're going to have more judges, you're going to need more court clerks, you're going to need more probation agents, you're going to need, all the support staff that goes along with that. If there's more jury trials, you're going to need more jurors. I mean, the whole thing expands. The orphans court, in a way, is kind of nice because if it can work stuff out at the lowest possible level, you don't have to involve that. And from the perspective of what gets the most justice for the least among us, the orphans court, I think, does that better because it's not one of the higher level courts. It's a less formal kind of process. And I know I had to handle my grandfather's estate, and I found the process worked extremely well. Didn't have to even bother to go through the courts part of it, working with the Register of Wills office. Everything moved very, very quickly for a small estate, and that'll still be okay. But in this, I'm going to be voting no because I think this is throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. I think what they ought to do is require that everybody be a member of the bar and practice some area of law for 5 years or more. And that's what I advocated before they passed this. I know a lot of the elected officials support this because the Register of Wills supports it. And he's correct in that there have been some problems with this particular court, but I think the answer to this goes a little too far. I can tell you the Central Committee took no position on it. The Democrats. I don't know what the Republican Central Committee is on it. One of the nice things, though, about having attorneys run for office like that and having a choice in voting for people, these sitting judge process, I've always found has been biased, and not just race and sex, but more income biased. People from large law firms typically are the ones you see getting appointed to judgeships. You might have some people that have done some time as a prosecutor or a public defender. Maybe they work for legal aid, but often they went to Harvard Law School and they're not lawyers for working people necessarily. They're people that have lived a different kind of lifestyle. And I don't think that's particularly fair or open. I think you want to have influence on that. I'm not sure you want Larry Hogan putting the judges in Howard County when we can elect our own. And in this race, again, I don't know the three all that well, but we have 3 Democrats that are running and currently no Republicans. So this is going to be 3 Democratic judges as opposed to a Hogan appointee. So I think this works out better for all of us. I'll just run through the others real quick because I did have some thoughts on it. Court of Appeals and Special Appeals. I can tell you when I was in law school, I found it weird that Court of Appeals was higher than the Special Appeals. It seems like everything should go to an appeals court, and then they're really like tough ones should go to a Special Appeals court. Some places call their Superior Court. You would think Superior is the highest court. It's actually the trial court or the lowest court in some states. So yeah, the whole thing's confusing. I'm not sure a good case has been made for making the name change, but quite frankly, I don't have a strong position on it. And I can tell you the Central Committee has no position on it either. Question 2, the eligibility to serve. One of the problems with eligibility to serve usually comes up around redistricting because districts change, people move about, they move into different districts. I'm not sure how that plays out for that. Also, our most transient population tends to be lower income. So is this something that will have a bias against lower income folks running for office? I think it could. And so for that reason, I have some questions about it. But I think the point that you ought to live in the district that you're running is a legitimate point. The Central Committee's for it. I think that's the purpose of this. So I think it's a good purpose, but I think it needs some tweaks. The question 3, the jury trials. One of the concerns I have, and some people brought it up as a question, how does this help those that are the working poor? Because it's expensive to hire a lawyer, and that's true, although with legal aid, usually folks that need one can often get one. But the bigger point is, if the judges that are being appointed to the bench have a bias towards large law firms that come from more well-to-do families, if you want to get real justice, you want to put 12 normal average people in the box. So having the access to have a jury trial, if you feel like you've gotten a judge that you think is not going to be sensitive to your case because they come from the upper crust, I think having a jury trial kind of evens the score a little bit. And so for that reason, I'm going to be voting against it. The cannabis, I can tell you in the 10 years that I was doing prosecutions in Baltimore City, and I did thousands and thousands of cases, I can remember 3 people that actually went to prison for a marijuana possession case. And in all 3 of those cases, they were either on parole or probation for a homicide. So let's be clear who's behind bars for this. Also, the maximum penalty was 1 year, which with the way parole works in Maryland basically is 6 months. If you have a sentence of 6 months or less, you're not going out of your jurisdiction. You stay at the local detention center. So nobody's going to Pennsylvania or Alabama on a marijuana charge in Maryland. That said, I'm still in favor of the idea of saying, let's legalize this, because I don't think criminalizing makes a whole lot of sense. Medicalizing completely, we're already there. The problem is it's still going to be illegal federally. So no matter what we do here in Maryland, whether we pass it or we don't, it's still going to be illegal federally, and that's going to disqualify people from jobs. It's still going to be questions that are going to be asked for security clearances. There's still going to be drug testing for at least federal jobs and maybe others. You also have the open question of people driving school buses, whether they're on recreational marijuana or medical marijuana. Those issues do come up. And there are some legitimate questions of people who use this for long periods of time, particularly high-level doses. Whether it's illegal or illegal makes no difference. There's a problem with people who overuse, and we do have to take a look at that. Again, that said, I'm voting in favor of it. Central Committee's in favor of it, but I don't think that's the end. I think the fact that it's still illegal federally means that's the area you've got to look at. And I actually think President Biden's been pretty good on that by trying to move the needle, I think, on that and try to get rid of a lot of the convictions and pardon a lot of people for mere possession. I think that's the way to go. But what you got to be worried about is you can legalize it, but if it's not regulated by the FDA, people could be lacing with PCP or God knows what. So there's a need for regulation, but it doesn't have to be regulated through the criminal justice. And I guess the last one, you guys covered that question A. I'm for it. There you go.
Thanks, Ward. Are there any questions? Okay, very good. Thanks, Ward. That was a very good background on the orphans court, and I totally agree. It would be helpful to have some experience as an attorney before setting foot in the orphans court. Serving at the orphans court. I also share your concerns about doing away with it, and I think in terms of resources and resource burden that it would contribute to the circuit court. I don't know if that's been fully vetted. So my personal decision would be to vote against eliminating it, and hopefully your explanation has given everybody what the information that they need for their own decision. All right, so